Welcome to the debate. The situation in Iran has reached a really critical inflection point. It's being fueled by a catastrophic economic failure. I mean, a completely devalued currency, stratospheric costs, and the nation is enduring what the source material correctly labels its largest and most brutal cycle of chaos and violence. We are watching a domestic crisis rapidly transition into a full-scale threat to the regime's continuity, especially given the brutally repressive response. Mass arrests, real ammunition being used against protesters, and the chilling use of internet blackouts. Tehran it's genuinely fighting for its survival against its own people.
And the United States has made it crystal clear it intends to intervene in this existential fight. President Trump's very public guarantees of help for the protesters have been matched by a rapid and, I should say, highly visible military buildup. We saw the announcement of the USS Abraham Lincoln arriving in the region on January 14th, and that was followed almost immediately by the USS George H.W. Bush sailing toward the eastern Mediterranean just 2 days later. And perhaps most telling of all, the U.S. initiated the full evacuation of Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which is a key operational hub.
Right. This is not just saber rattling. This is a definitive posture shift. So the central question we really have to address is this. Despite the clear buildup and the very explicit threats, why hasn't President Trump authorized a direct military strike on Iran yet? My position is that the delay is purely strategic and logistical. Washington is waiting for the complete package of forces and the necessary allied coordination to guarantee a decisive regime-toppling outcome.
And then I suppose I'm coming at it from a different way. While the military movements are, of course, undeniable, I would argue the delay is better explained by the overwhelming political risk and, frankly, the profound uncertainty surrounding the success of a regime change operation. This high-stakes calculus suggests a strong possibility of strategic paralysis, or maybe even the ultimate abandonment of the strike option, regardless of the military capability that's being positioned offshore.
I see where you think that. I do. But let me give you a different perspective, one that's rooted in military necessity. The current absence of an attack it's evidence of methodical preparation, not paralyzing hesitation. When the stated goal is regime change for a country the size and the complexity of Iran, you just cannot afford a limited engagement.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence of intent is staggering. The evacuation of Al Udeid is critical. It's not just moving some personnel. It confirms Washington is systematically reducing its vulnerability footprint. Removing supply caches, pulling support personnel, specifically because it anticipates a massive escalation and a high probability of Iranian retaliation against nearby fixed U.S. assets. This is the operational precursor for something big.
Right.
An operational necessity dictates waiting for the two carrier groups. Without both the USS Lincoln and the USS Bush in theater, the U.S. loses critical concepts like persistence and flexibility. Persistence means maintaining continuous combat air patrols and strike readiness 24 hours a day, 7 days a week over a vast operational area. Flexibility means having the redundancy to absorb losses and conduct simultaneous strikes across disparate target sets. And while sure, long-range bombers can hit targets, they just lack the sustainability and the on-demand versatility that two carrier groups provide. The goal isn't a symbolic raid. It's explicitly to overthrow the Ayatollahs. This requires a very broad attack targeting the entire infrastructure, command centers, missile and drone networks, Revolutionary Guards bases, and yes, targeting the political and religious leadership directly. That magnitude of effort requires the full strategic force now being positioned.
That's a compelling argument regarding operational readiness. It really is. But have you considered that the sheer scale of the political and strategic risk it overrides the marginal tactical convenience of having two carriers versus one or using long-range assets? To me, the delay is best explained by the immense political downside inherent in trying to overthrow such a deeply entrenched, ideologically driven regime. The core fear for President Trump must be the cost of failure. Even if he deploys the maximum conventional force, what if the regime absorbs the blows? What if the leadership structure remains intact or decentralized, or just goes deeper underground? In that scenario, launching this maximal strike would fundamentally backfire.
It hands the Ayatollahs a narrative gift that Iran is under external attack by the Great Satan, and that allows them to successfully rally domestic support, quell the protests, and increase repression against the very people the U.S. claims it's trying to help. The fact that the attack hasn't occurred, despite all the promises and the visible deployments, suggests that certainty of success is what's lacking. Simply dropping some bombs here and there will only increase repression. And furthermore, we can't forget the risks of a regional conflict. The U.S. knows Iran is capable of significant retaliation. You just have to recall the 12-day war of June 2025 and the potential for triggering proxy conflicts across the Levant. This heavy risk of a sustained regional war and high operational cost, it outweighs any benefit if success, and by success I mean regime change, is not virtually guaranteed.
Okay, so let's delve into point one, the military buildup itself. You frame the carriers as a marginal convenience. I disagree, fundamentally. The combined movement of the USS Lincoln and the USS Bush, coupled with the high-risk, high-cost evacuation of El Udeid, is the clearest operational signal you can get, short of actually launching missiles. Consider the technical implications of El Udeid. It's not just people. It's years of pre-positioned ordnance, maintenance facilities, sensitive intelligence fusion centers. Moving this material is disruptive and it's costly. You only absorb that cost if the alternative, leaving it vulnerable to Iranian short or medium-range missile retaliation, is deemed intolerable. This tells us that Washington anticipates a response so severe that maintaining a large fixed footprint within range of Iranian missile batteries is unacceptable. This confirms intent for a large, decisive operation where retaliation is expected.
The carriers, unlike a few flights of B-2s from halfway across the world, offer the sustained sortie rate and the immediate responsiveness required to keep the air clear over Iranian airspace during a prolonged attack phase. The delay is technical. It's about waiting for the precise moment the logistics and operational assets align for this massive effort.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the presence of the carriers transforms a low-probability, high-risk political gamble into a sure thing. While moving the carriers and clearing Al Udeid unquestionably improves tactical military capability, capability does not equal confirmed intent for a regime change strike. It gives the president better options, certainly, but it does not erase the monumental political risk inherent in the objective itself. If the sole necessity was achieving a high-volume strike capability, the U.S. could utilize its vast inventory of long-range cruise missiles launched from submarines, or B-52s flying from Diego Garcia, or even the continental U.S. Those options minimize vulnerability, they reduce the immediate escalation profile, and they avoid placing two multi-billion-dollar capital ships, which represent the symbol maximum of U.S. power, within range of potential swarming attacks or coastal defenses. The existence of a viable alternative, the possibility that Trump has just, given up on attacking due to the low chance of success, that remains a credible explanation for the delay. Why hasn't he used the lower risk, lower visibility options if the target set is truly ready?
Well, that's because the target set isn't merely military infrastructure, it is the political superstructure of the Islamic Republic. Which brings up to point two, the efficacy of a broad strike. A missile strike from a B-2 can eliminate a bunker. It cannot maintain air dominance or provide close air support for long-term operational goals. The logic of waiting for the full package is precisely to achieve regime change through overwhelming force, and thereby validate taking the political risk. The strategy is to immediately break the regime's military arms, specifically the Revolutionary Guard, and the missile infrastructure, which will force paralyzing division among the ruling elites. This allows political power to dismantle internally, giving the protesters the necessary window of opportunity and momentum. And this requires precision strikes on command, control, and leadership nodes that just cannot be guaranteed without the persistence afforded by the two carriers. And crucially, the delay allows time to coordinate the necessary agreements with regional allies, namely Israel and Saudi Arabia. Their active participation isn't just helpful, it is strategically necessary. They provide essential intelligence, messaging alignment, and frankly, they bear a portion of the long-term regional stabilization burden. Waiting for them to be fully on board ensures that the regional reaction to regime change is supportive, not destabilizing.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame the reliance on allied coordination very differently. I see it as a significant political liability, not a strategic asset. While Israel and Saudi Arabia would certainly cheer the fall of the Ayatollahs, their public participation in a U.S.-led regime change operation carries extreme political risk.
How so?
Well, if these allies participate actively, as you suggest, it gives the Iranian regime all the ammunition they need to spin the war not as a defense against internal protest, but as an external plot orchestrated by Zionists and Gulf monarchists, acting as puppets for the U.S. This radically increases the likelihood of a successful regime narrative that undermines the protesters' moral authority and strengthens the hand of hardliners. What if, after the initial strike, coordination fails? What if Saudi Arabia or Israel, fearing Iranian retaliation, decide to limit their involvement? The U.S. is then left holding the bag for a failed regime change operation, isolated and globally condemned. The historical difficulty of achieving complete regime change suggests that waiting for carrier groups and allied sign-off is simply insufficient to guarantee the fall of such a deeply rooted religious and political establishment.
I have to disagree that allied participation is a liability. It's a necessary condition for ensuring the outcome. You are projecting the risk of failure onto the preparation phase. The entire purpose of the delay is to achieve point 3, mitigating the political risk through maximum operational readiness. The calculation is sound. Without the full force package, the 2 carriers and assured allied participation, the operational cost grows and the margin of maneuver is severely limited. A limited strike carries the highest political risk of all, failure. The delay is necessary precisely to mitigate that risk of failure. Only by striking with the full package can the U.S. be certain of achieving the desired political outcome, which is the complete, irreversible collapse of the regime. Anything less is a gamble that the president seems unwilling to take, which is exactly why he is waiting. He has to validate his promise of help with a result, not just a show of force.
And I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because, well, it treats military readiness as a kind of panacea for political uncertainty. The political risk is the overriding factor here. And the most devastating outcome for the protesters is Trump simply deciding that the probability of success is too low to risk the heavy consequences of failure. If the attack hasn't happened yet, after such explicit threats and highly publicized military movements designed in part to signal strength and intimidate, it signals a deeper strategic hesitation, one that's rooted in uncertainty about achieving regime change. We have to look at the silence, the lack of kinetic action. This pause suggests that the assessment of regional retaliation and the potential domestic backlash, combined with the low probability of successfully fracturing that deep religious and political establishment, outweighs any operational advantage gained by having 2 carrier groups in place. The political cost of failure, strengthening the Ayatollahs, and validating their external threat narrative is simply too high.
So, to wrap up my argument, I maintain that strategic calculus demands patience when the stakes are existential. The deployment of the 2 carrier groups, USS Lincoln and USS Bush, along with the very deliberate evacuation of a critical asset like Al Udeid, indicates an intent to strike that is not predicated on risk avoidance, but on risk management. The delay ensures that when the U.S. finally acts, it has the requisite force and, crucially, the coordinated allied support from countries like Israel and Saudi Arabia necessary to guarantee the regime's fall and avoid a counterproductive limited engagement. This isn't paralysis, it is preparation for total victory.
And in contrast, I still believe the immense political risk of failure, the very real chance of strengthening the regime and escalating domestic brutality, suggests that the delay is either a terminal hesitation or a sober realization that conventional force, even at the level of 2 carrier groups, may be insufficient to guarantee the overthrow of a deeply entrenched power structure. The high-profile lack of action points to the political risks of massive regional conflict and strategic failure, outweighing the logistical benefits of waiting for the naval assets.
The geopolitical situation remains incredibly tense, and I think the material clearly demonstrates the complexity of U.S. decision-making when vast military capability has to be balanced against severe, high-stakes political outcomes.
Indeed, the fundamental disagreement remains.
Is the lack of an attack evidence of calculated, strategic patience designed to ensure maximal success? Or is it a signal of profound strategic avoidance due to the political uncertainty surrounding the true efficacy of conventional power against this specific regime? The listener is left to weigh whether the risk mitigation strategy is working or whether it has simply resulted in strategic paralysis.